Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Joe Fisher. We will talk Commodore sports and mostly baseball. This episode presented by the Well Coffee House, a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roasted coffee along with house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. There are 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area: Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org, the Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our co-sponsor, WellSpire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Today's news presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. Vanderbilt has landed a basketball transfer. His name, Quentin Malloy-Brown. He comes to Vanderbilt from Rice. Will have to sit out the coming year, it appears. He averaged 7.2 points, 5.9 rebounds, and was a shot-blocking presence in the paint for the Owls as well. Today's guest line brought to you by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on their sheets for years. Love sleeping on them again now that I'm back from Omaha. Had no clue how comfortable they were before I got them, and got a great reminder of how comfortable they were when I slept on other sheets for a week and a half. These sheets are fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. You can try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. Joining us now, Joe Fisher, the voice of the Vanderbilt Commodores. You know him well. Joe, what a season it was in baseball. What was it like being behind the mic, not just to call the last minute, but just the whole season, which frankly was pretty phenomenal from beginning to end?
Well, this one was a little bit different, Chris, in that this was a team that had high expectations from the beginning, had everything heaped upon them. And really the biggest thing they had to deal with was handling all of that, being the team with the target on their back. And, you know, a lot of times the hardest thing to do is win when everybody expects you to win. And this group just kept doing it. I think I learned a tremendous amount about this team in the SEC tournament because, you know, this was a team that had won the regular season. They were going to be clearly a top 8 national seed. It would have made no difference whatsoever what happened in Hoover. They could have gone down there, lost 2 games, gone home, and still have been a top 8 national seed. But they went down there with the mindset and the intention to win the tournament, and that's what they did. And I think at that point, that sort of solidified, to me at least, this team just has a mindset. We play every day, we win every time we can, and we just take one task at a time. And so I was not at all surprised to be in the position we were in Omaha. And you know, I've been blessed to, you know, have called a national championship in 2014. We were on the precipice again in 15, and to come back in 19 and really, Chris, kind of have the chance that last inning or so. You know, if you remember in 14, it was a tight game, 1-run game, but there was a lot on the line coming down to each pitch. That was not the case here. You kind of had a chance, and even talking to some of the players, they kind of realized, okay, got the first out. We're this much closer to what we think is inevitable. So it was a lot of fun to be able to enjoy and to watch them enjoy what they had accomplished, which I believe is clearly not only the best Vanderbilt baseball performance ever, but I think one of the best college baseball performances ever.
You've had some epic calls. That one from 2014 was one of them. I guess I wouldn't say it a disappointment, but a different dynamic. That last game was a little anticlimactic, but I don't think anybody was complaining by that point.
No, I don't think so. No, I think at that point, and it's very funny because I remember talking to Tim Corbin going back to the Super Regional Series, and we talked before Game 2 against Duke. And he told me at that point, he said, you know, he said, if we win this game, I feel pretty confident that we'll win Game 3. I felt the same way in the national final against Michigan. I kind of felt like if they win Game 2, they're over the hump and they'll take care of business in Game 3. And that's exactly what happened. You know, they fell behind early, and Mason Hickman settled down after those first three hitters. And I think that's an element of this whole thing that's kind of been forgotten. That Michigan comes out, rifles three singles, gets a run, nobody out. They've barreled him up three times, and he responds by striking out the side in the first. I thought that was a pivotal moment in the game. And then you get the home run to get right back into it, and then you're off and running. And that's the way this team has been all year long. It was a spark from somebody, and I think the key was it didn't have to be from the same somebody. It could be from anybody in the nine. And so I think that was a huge key to their success, is they did not rely on one superstar, though they had a couple of them. They relied on the balance that they had 1 through 9.
You and I have watched baseball long enough to know there are a couple of components to a championship team. One of them is just the physical talent. I don't think there was any doubt that they had that for a while, maybe in certain pitching spots, but we figured the depth could cover that, especially with Tyler Brown able to go multiple innings, and it did. The other thing, though, is mindset. And that's a big thing. And I think that the point that you made about the Duke game and the Super Regional is on point with the way I saw it. I thought that if they won that game, they would move on and win game 3. I thought the same thing against Michigan, they did. But I want to know, in your mind, when the first time you thought that they maybe had that between the ears part, because we figured they might, but you don't really know. To me, my point when I sat up and took notice was that Florida series where they just ransacked the Gators in 3 games. Did that one register with you, or was there maybe another moment in time that stood up and got your attention and said, okay, I think these guys have got it between the ears?
Yeah, there were a couple. The Florida series is certainly one of them, because you're coming off a Texas A&M series that was a big disappointment. You win game 1, you're leading game 2 comfortably, and you let game 2 get away, and then you lay an egg in game 3 and end up taking the series loss. And then you got to play a Florida team and in a highly touted 2 top 10 teams meeting each other, and to really kind of blow them away in all 3 of those games. I think certainly sent a message not only to them, but to the rest of the country that these guys were there to stay. I remember there may be a couple of other instances. I remember going to South Carolina, and a South Carolina team that was down and struggling, and people were kind of looking at it and saying, well, this is a team that could rebound right here. They're going to be dangerous. They're rebuilding. And to go down there and score 22 runs on them in the first game, to send that message that no, you're not going to have any success this weekend. You need to understand that. I thought was another really kind of interesting moment, in their process to be able to win that game. I would tell you another one, and it falls kind of off the radar screen for a lot of people, to go to Louisville, for the battle for the barrel. In a game that, it's again, 2 top 10 teams meeting as they do every year, and going up there and playing the way they did. If you watched that game and you see a Louisville team that's extremely good, obviously they got to Omaha, but to just have your hand on them and have your finger on them the entire time in their ballpark, I thought was really, really impressive. I thought it said a lot about what this team could do. And, I talked to a number of the guys a couple of days ago, and it's, when you started looking at moments that were down on this year, there really weren't a lot of them. And I think one of the keys to this team was, even when they had a hiccup or a bump in the road, a lot of teams will make a mistake or let one get away and let it lead to another one, and then another one, and then things begin to fall off the rails. This team had the ability to maybe take a punch and then get right back up again. And I think that's the quality of a championship team.
That's a great point, because to that point, and through no fault of their own, they had not played a lot of really, really tough road games. They had the 2 series at Georgia and A&M, which were probably the 2 toughest teams literally in the country for them to match up with, but they still won a game out of each of those. But yeah, you're right. I thought that the effort there, one of the 2 things, I say 2, there's so many things that were remarkable about this year. There were only two times that I really maybe questioned the effort. I thought one of them was at Game 3 at A&M where, frankly, I just thought they were flat across the board. The other one, maybe that Super Regional Game 1 against Duke. Now, that one kind of had its own dynamic and that it got away from them late. But, yeah, against the backdrop of the draft. But you're right, there just weren't a lot of moments where they let a bad one turn into another.
Yeah, I give them a lot of credit for that. And I think when you look at the grand scheme of things and you go across 70 plus games, you're probably going to have a day now and then where you're not dialed in, where everybody's not, hitting on all cylinders. And what you hope is enough guys are to be able to get you over that hump anyway. Certainly, I think the A&M game, if I had to pick one game that was probably the biggest disappointment of the year for me, it would be Game 3 at A&M. That was the only time where you kind of felt like after letting that one get away on the Saturday, that they just weren't in sync. They weren't quite ready to go, and A&M took advantage of that. As you said, a very good team playing at Bluebell Park. That's going to be a tough matchup anyway. But if that's the only blip on the radar screen for an entire year, that's a pretty darn good year. And I think that proves, why this team walked away with the title when it was all said and done.
Well, two other things were leadership and chemistry. And I don't know that this team had a visibly identifiable leader the way it has in past, maybe with the David Price. Not to say it didn't have some, but maybe going into the year you didn't know who they were. But I think two hallmarks of this team were just chemistry and cohesiveness. And here's what I mean by that. I would go down on the field after games, and Jason Gonzalez is a kid who would have been playing for pretty much anybody else and had a good start to the season, yet he finds himself on the bench, barely played the last half of the season. When you would see Jason, and he would smile, and you would have thought that he just had a 3-home run game, but that wasn't the case. I think that you had a lot of situations like that, Cooper Davis getting Wally pipped. Those could have easily turned into chemistry issues. I mean, let's face it, Joe, you probably have 30 guys on this team that came to campus expecting to get probably picked in the first 5 rounds, whether that's realistic or not. But to be able to go through the season they had without any visible splits in a season of remarkable things, I think that's at the top of the list.
Well, it's a tremendous credit to Tim Corbin and the culture that he has built in this program. And you can take it several steps further if you want. For example, Mason Hickman. Here's a guy that clearly was talented enough to be a weekend starter in the Southeastern Conference. I don't think there's any question about that. And he accepted the role that was given to him, which was the one that says, okay, just roll out there and win every midweek game because they're all important and we need them. And that's the role I need you in. And he, relished that role. And then when things changed down the stretch, he was able to evolve and be ready to be plugged into obviously a couple of the biggest starts of his entire life. You're right, though. There are a lot of guys in other circumstances that might not have been able to handle not playing or being platooned or whatever the case may be and would have moped and sulked and that this team does not have that. I think a tremendous amount of credit not only goes to Tim and to the staff, but I think a tremendous amount of credit goes to the seniors on this team. Julian Infante, a Stephen Scott, those guys, and Ethan Paul that stepped in, a Patrick Raby, and then another classic case of a guy. Here's your all-time winningest pitcher, in Vanderbilt history, and down the stretch of the season, he's put on the back burner because he's just not hot at the right time, and you've got somebody else that's pitching a little bit better. And Patrick was the first one to step up and say, I get it, I understand it, and I'll be ready to step in and do whatever you need me to do. I mean, that is a special gift of a team that is really all about the team and not about themselves. And that's easy to talk about. It's easy to put on the wall. It's easy to say, this is what we're going to be about. It's harder to live. And this team lives it and lived it and proved it. And, I think at the end of the day, if you want to make a case for that kind of culture, well, you just look at what happened right here, and that explains how you should perform.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Pat, too. That was another great one that deserved mention. But this is sort of a silly question because, as you said, he's so outstanding at managing these situations. But let's be honest. The way the season ended, the way they dominated, the way they've got so much pitching coming back, the way that although we don't know what the lineup's going to look like, we know that there's kids on the bench like Gonzalez and Isaiah Thomas and Cooper Davis who can be stars in this league who are going to step up and take that vacated playing time. This is the team that'll easily be top 5 preseason next year. Who knows, maybe number 1 or number 2. You got a kid in Kumar Rocker who's going to be the face of college baseball who just dominated everybody down the stretch. What do you think the key will be to? I'm not going to say they're going to be complacent because I know him enough to know that they won't be. But how does he keep the fire burning through a situation like that, and not having people say, "Well, we've done it before. We don't need to work as hard." To me, that's a big challenge. I think he is the best guy to handle it. But to me, that's not something that an ordinary human being as a leader can easily manage.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think he will do 2 things. I think one, and if you heard Tim talk at the celebration, he said, every year is connected to another. That was a phrase that he used. And so it's interesting because you try to stay in the moment and you try to focus on every game individually, but then you have to live in the past as well and understand that everything you've done in the past leads to what you're going to do now and what you're going to do in the future. My guess is that he will do a really good job of selling the fact that, okay, that was a great team. It was great to be a part of that. That chapter is closed. We're about to write another chapter. And I think what helps him in that regard is there are going to be enough changes. You know, if you were rolling the same team out there again, you know, basically with very few personnel changes, I think the challenge would be bigger, you know, because at that point, you know, you're trying to tell them, okay, you did it, do it again. But with different faces involved in different places and some new faces plugged in, I think that gives you a new energy, a new synergism, and a new opportunity to tell these guys, okay, they wrote their story. Now it's time for you to write yours. And I think Tim is about as good as anybody I've ever been around in preaching that message and getting that story sold. And I think that's exactly what they'll start doing when they gather for fall camp.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm going to ask you one more question before I go to our mailbag. I think you figure the 2 starters on the weekend to start will be Rocker and Hickman, probably in that order. Who's the third, though? Man, you got so many great candidates. Tyler Brown would be in some ways the most logical guy to go in that. I think he can handle a longer workload, but boy, it sure worked well in the closer spot. What's your prediction for who that third guy ends up being?
That's a really good question, Chris. And I don't know. I would tell you, this is just me, and I've not talked to Tim. I've not talked to Scott Brown in any regard in this situation. You've got a number of talented left-handers out there right now that I think are capable of inheriting a starting spot, whether it's a Zach King, whether it's a Hugh Fisher, whether it's a Jake Eater. You've got some guys out there that I think certainly could be candidates to be that person. And I've always thought, you know, ideally, it would be nice to be able to mix in a left-hander with a couple of right-handers in a starting rotation on a weekend. I don't know that that will be the case. You mentioned Tyler Brown, and certainly he's got the durability, but this is just me selfishly. I like Tyler Brown having an influence in more than one game in a week. So I have no problem with him staying exactly where he is and being that guy that you can plug in for a couple of innings, you know, on 1 or 2 bases or 1 or 2 events through the course of a weekend. We may not know. And if they do what they did this year, you remember they kind of worked through February and March and tried to figure out things and got to April and said, okay, I think this is where we need to be, and got settled in and got settled into a lineup. I don't think there's any question that will happen again, but I will be very curious to see those left-handed arms that have been in the bullpen. I think there are a couple of guys there that can compete for a starting spot.
Yeah, I don't know that you can lose either way with Tyler Brown, but I do have to follow up on one thing. Was that a Zach King returns for his senior season prediction mixed in there?
I think so. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, again, I guess that's all. You know, we're kind of up in the air, obviously, with DeMarco and with Clark and King and, several other guys that have decisions to make. But and that may be part of the conversation. Chris, I don't know. Do you go back and say, look, I'd really like to consider coming back, but if I'm coming back, what's the role going to be? And then see what, Tim Corbin and Scott Brown say in that regard. But I just think the good news is, if you're a Vanderbilt fan, I think the good news is there are several options that are going to be out there and available.
I think that this might be his most talented pitching staff coming into the season that he's had.
Yeah, I guess the numbers might say that. It's going to be very interesting to see. And, everybody, obviously, I think, Chris, I think you agree. I think you anticipate Kumar is going to be your Friday guy, and you anticipate Mason's probably going to be your Saturday guy, depending on how you want to go with that. Mason might like being the Sunday guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's nice to be able to roll into a situation where you feel pretty confident you've got 2/3 of your starting rotation for the SEC already settled before you ever get to the year. That's a nice plus to have.
Yeah, and to your comments, he has oftentimes put those roles up for grab going to the spring. Just because we think we know doesn't always mean we know.
No, that's exactly right. No, at the end, they may not know. Tim talked a lot about not only with pitching, but I think one of the keys with this team, going back to putting this team together when it started in the fall, they had a lot of question marks, and it's a tremendous story when you think about it, because here you've got looking at an infield thinking, okay, what are we going to do? Julian Infante has struggled at the plate when we were playing at first base. If you remember, Stephen Scott played at first base. Austin Martin played at first base. They were looking around for what are we going to do? Ethan Paul at second base, Ethan Paul at shortstop, Jason Gonzalez at third base, Austin Martin at third base. There were a lot of moving parts that had to be determined, and the ability for them through the course of the fall and into February and early March to be able to say, okay, this is what we're going to go with, and take guys like an Austin Martin and a Harrison Ray. And Harrison Ray is a guy, he was an outfielder. And to be adapted and rolled into that second base position and settle in the way he did was a tremendous part of this team's success. And then you had, and I think Ethan Paul was the key to the whole thing. I think he was the guy. The shortstop position was the one that Tim Corbin, I think, was most concerned about. And once they made the decision that Ethan's going to be the guy, that's where we're going to go, then everything else, they started to fit around it. And I talked to Austin about it a little bit, and I said, did you have any idea where you're going to play? Because if you remember, Austin the year before started 6 different positions. And Austin said, I didn't care, but I played a little third base, so it didn't bother me. Wherever they wanted to put me was fine. But once they kind of settled in and said, okay, this is the situation, this is how we're going to play, this is going to be our lineup, then this team took off. And tremendous credit to those guys who had to adjust and learn and gel together, and certainly did so.
That's very well said. I'm going to go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. If you're looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs, Josh has you covered. Call him today, 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ, or on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He is my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about him on this podcast. Door King asks, which game did you enjoy the most this season?
In baseball or in
I presume in baseball, but you can answer that however you like.
Wow, that's interesting, because I've not thought of those in those terms. Wow, let's see. In baseball, I would tell you the Ole Miss game to win the SEC tournament was pretty invigorating. To fall that far behind and see a team rally the way they did, and kind of get a feeling, to be honest, about 5 or 6 innings in, to think to myself, okay, I think we're going to win this game. That was pretty special, and to see people deliver when they had to win a tournament championship. So that would be pretty high on the list. I would tell you in baseball as well, the Louisville game Game 3 at the World Series, to come from behind and win that game. Maybe not the whole game, but the 8th and 9th inning was pretty fun. That was that was great theater, and so that was a lot of fun to be a part of. And then, of course, obviously, if you're calling a national championship game, that's kind of hard to put on the back burner. That's a pretty special opportunity. A lot of folks hope to get that chance, and I've now had that chance on several occasions. Football wise, it's obviously when you beat Tennessee, that's a big deal, and so that's a lot of fun to call that game. I guess the blessing is, Chris, if you ask me that, I've got multiple options. It's not just one obvious game. It's nice to have several options to choose from.
Indeed. And I want to circle back to the Luke Smith Louisville game because I was actually in Omaha in the press box and I was listening to you on the broadcast at the time. And if I recall correctly, because this is the way that I experience, I tell people sometimes I'm the last guy to notice what happens after the last pitch has been thrown of an inning. And I think it kind of caught you off guard too. I did not realize what had happened till my phone started blowing up. And then I think around me in the press box, people were checking Twitter and seeing it too. I did not see what Luke Smith did. I think it took us all a few minutes in the press box to realize what had just happened.
Well, actually, I think a lot of us, I'm just speaking for myself, I knew something had happened, but I didn't know what it was. And then with the luxury of having a monitor in my booth, and ESPN jumped on it, and they kept, showing it on. And once I saw the replay, I said, okay, now I know exactly what happened. But no, you're right. I mean, because it was, I think the thing that caught everybody, it was so out of the blue. I mean, there was, some games you're in and they have a tenor about them. They have, there's an edge about them, and, everybody's on edge and everybody's chirping at each other. And you see that this game didn't have that. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, this happens. And so that was what caught everybody's attention. And what caught my attention most was the home plate umpire at that time, goes over to the Louisville dugout. He's talking to Dan McDonald, and comes over to the Vanderbilt dugout. He's talking to our guys. I was like, what the heck is going on? And it was in reaction to that. And then for Vanderbilt's reaction to that in the ninth inning was pretty special. And I think you saw, Chris, as well, when Vanderbilt, when Ethan Paul gets the double to tie the game, our guys are coming out of the dugout. I mean, they're piling out, and the umpire's trying to send them back and say, no, we're not going to let this escalate. To their credit, nothing escalated, and I don't think it would have anyway. But no, you're right. I didn't see it immediately, but fortunately, because of the abilities and quite frankly, to the detriment of Louisville, ESPN really focused on it. And that, I think that fed the fire for Vanderbilt.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say the 2020 Battle of the Barrel might be the most anticipated one yet.
I would start it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would, and I think the NCAA ought to make a special exception and let Julian Infante come back for one at bat.
Well, I think it's very interesting, and very well, Chris. I mean, Dan McDonald and Tim Corbin are extremely close friends, and I think this is just me, but if I had to pick two programs in the nation that have been built the right way and have done things the right way and have had great success to be in the upper echelon of programs in the nation, it would be Vanderbilt and Louisville. I don't think there's any question about it. What Dan has done in Louisville has been amazing. And then, of course, what Tim has done with 2 national championships. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of a healthy rivalry. And I think the players would tell you that. They're going to chirp. They're going to talk. There's going to be a little bit of an edge, but there's great respect for these two teams and for the way they play and for the programs that they have built. I think it's pretty cool to be in a situation where your program is comfortable enough and confident enough to be able to schedule this game year to year, because, there are a lot of teams that are trying to find a way to get in the NCAA tournament. And when you do that, you don't want to schedule this game. I mean, why would you schedule Louisville? And so to be in a situation where you're confident enough in your program and your ability that we can do this every year. This is no problem. I think it's a great credit both to Vanderbilt and to Louisville.
Yeah, I agree with that. I only wish it could be a 3-game series, but I understand why it's not. Papa Hick.
I don't think they're going to do that. Yeah.
No, I don't. I don't think they will either. And as much as it makes sense, you never know. Like you saw this in 2012, and to some extent last year. Even as optimistic as things can be, you're in the SEC, something can happen, the losses can pile up, and you get to a critical point, as good as things look on the front end, you got to have so many wins to get into the tournament. So I think that's probably it, is Tim's even seen this a little bit, that some years that they got dangerously close to that mark for the schedule they played. I'm sure Louisville feels the same way.
Yeah, I think they do. I thought it was interesting, too, and I talked to Mason Hickman about this. It was ironic. We played Louisville and Indiana State in the regular season. And then you end up playing them both in the postseason. And Mason, who pitched against them in the regular season, ended up pitching against them again in the postseason. That's not going to happen very often. But it tells you, to your point, Chris, the power of this schedule. I mean, it's one thing, again, to win 59 games, to do something that no other SEC team has ever done, but to do it against a strength of schedule that is going to be in the top 5 in the nation, with a combination not only of the SEC schedule, but your non-conference is pretty amazing. I don't think should be lost, in that area. And I know these guys, you try to schedule every year, and you try to balance and think about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes you schedule a team that you don't think is going to be very good, and they get a couple of players and suddenly they're way better, and vice versa. Sometimes you schedule a team that thinks going to be really good and they fall off the radar. I think this was I think it was an indication of how really good this team was, because you'd be hard pressed to find a tougher schedule for them to play.
By the way, that overall strength of schedule, according to Warren Nolan's final RPI numbers, and he tallies those through the last game of Omaha, was number 2. Only Auburn was ahead of Vanderbilt.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I think that adds just a little more luster to what they did. So Papa Hick 4VU says, how would you compare the 2014 national championship team to the 2019 team? Did you enjoy one more than the other? And if so, why?
Well, I didn't enjoy one more than the other. I would tell you, I certainly enjoyed 2014 because we'd never done it before. To be in that situation for the first time was very special. To carry it down to the wire, and Chris, we were talking about this earlier, in a game where you get down to game 3, it's a tie game, and John Norwood hits the only home run that Vanderbilt hit in the entire College World Series. That is basically the shot heard around the world. That's a very, very special moment. And so you relish that. And then again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, to roll in 2019, when everybody in the ballpark in Omaha and everybody in college baseball thinks, okay, Vanderbilt's here, they're supposed to be here, they're the best team, they should be here, they're going to win the whole thing. That's a totally different mindset to be in. That's the first time that we've really been in that position. And to deliver in that position is really special. So, there's no way that I can say I enjoyed one more than the other. I certainly enjoyed them both. I mean, I've kind of kidded with my wife Diana and everybody, and said, you know what? If you're going to go for 15 days, you might as well win the whole darn thing. And so we did that here in 19. So. I would not say that I enjoyed one more than the other. I just hope I get the chance to enjoy a few more.
Well, I think what was interesting about those two teams is they won in opposite fashion. I think the 2014 team hit 22 home runs, which, granted, that was because of the ball, but it forced you to play a different way. This one hit 100. The 2014 team, I guess if you looked at it from the perspective of a couple of years before, you would have said 2015 would have been the year, because that's when that would have been a junior-dominated team. They won it kind of a year early, where I think they turned over, 7 starters and they're starting 9. This one was the one from that perspective you could argue was maybe a year late. You had a lot of seniors come back. So really, in a lot of ways, those two teams were very much opposites.
It's funny, Chris, because I think if you think about two teams in Vanderbilt history that people would have thought would have won a national championship, it would have been 2007 and 2015. And I think it just goes to show you how difficult this is and how it can literally come down to one swing or one decision or one pitch in that regard. They are two very different teams. I don't think there's any question about that. That 14 team, had to battle back. There were some special moments in that run, to win an extra inning game, to force an opportunity to play for a game 3, and to play a close game against Virginia. This team was a much different. This was the one that was sitting up on top of the mountain and trying to knock everybody down that was trying to come and get them. And so it was two very different ways to go about a national championship, but they've accomplished both of them.
Superior says, this is Theodore. He says, we hear a lot about the exceptional character of the kinds of players Tim Corbin recruits. I wonder if Joe has any personal stories he'd be willing to share about the standout character of one of the players. Do your interactions with any particular player stand out to you?
Well, I think the blessing that when I travel with this team, Chris, I think one of the things that I notice, and it's little things, and I've been around a long time, but when you travel, you have tremendous amounts of baggage and luggage that have to be dealt with. And to see these guys get off a plane and all help load their own baggage on the buses, whatever needs to be done, and then every one of them shake hands with the bus driver. That's just what you do. I mean, this guy is doing something special for you, and they all want you to know how much they appreciate what you do. Guys that look out for me. I mean, there are guys that I've had players grab my equipment, coming off the belt, from the plane, and say, "Joe, I got it for you. Here we go. We'll take it. Don't worry about it." It happens all the time. I think the penultimate or the ultimate shot is, if you saw it, I don't know if you did, Chris, but Brooks Webb, who's our director of operations for baseball, and does a marvelous job in getting all this coordinated, took a picture in the dugout at TD Ameritrade Park in Omaha. And it was 1 hour after the end of the championship game. And Stephen Scott, who is a senior, was in the dugout picking up trash. And he was cleaning out the dugout to make sure it was totally clean by the time they were done. That's not something that anybody told him to do. It's something that was built into his makeup and built into a part of this culture. And I think that just speaks volumes of what this group is all about. I mean, I've heard horror stories of people who travel with teams that just trash planes and trash hotels and all that kind of stuff. And I can guarantee you that would never fly for a moment with Tim Corbin and with this Vanderbilt baseball program. It's just not a part of what they are all about. It's not just about winning games. It's about life lessons. It's about learning how to do things the right way. And that's a very special element of this to me. I mean, I've had a number of guys that, have tried to pick me up on certain situations and, do certain things and, help on a broadcast or kid in any way they can. These guys are first class, and that is expected in this program.
I saw the Stephen Scott tweet, and from my vantage point, I've got to be about as down the middle as I can. You don't want to be too critical because you got to work with everybody, and it's plus it's college kids, but you gotta call your things. And I think you do a good job of doing the broadcast too. You're in a tough spot, but I've heard you question some things at times or ask some questions. From my standpoint, I don't work for the university, and so you don't want to come off as a shill promoter for the school. And for that reason, I don't say a lot of things on Twitter, but that was one that I felt like I had to retweet, especially with a lot of the shade being thrown at them for the scholarships and things like that. And even some back talk, I think, from the Louisville people about the brawl that precipitated. I just felt like that tweet to me encompassed my experience behind the scenes with them. I feel like their program has been like that since day one. Those kids have always treated me with respect. Again, you try to pick your moments with that stuff because you've got to be conscious in my role how it comes across. but I just thought that was the perfect time to share. That has been so much my experience with them. And frankly, Joe, I think that's a reason that I'm around a lot. When you know you're going to be treated well, and when you know you're seeing something special in so many ways, there's a real magnetism that does attract you to that.
Well, I think so. And I think the other side of it too, Chris, and I know you would agree with this. If you respect them and you respect what they do, they respect you. I think it kind of comes down to that. I think the big part about Stephen Scott's photo that you're talking about is that was not staged. That was not get down here on your knees and pick up something under the bench and I'm going to take a picture and send it out. Stephen had no idea. I mean, he was doing that just because that's what he has learned and what is ingrained in him. That's what you do. You leave the place better than you came. And so I think it's wonderful, in that regard. And, there are people that are going to look at that and kind of poo-poo it and go, well, yeah, okay, that's fine, but that's pablum. That's no big deal. I think it is a big deal. And I think it's been funny because, and Chris, as you well know, you've heard over the last week, I've heard, Kumar certainly compared to Tim Corbin and Nick Saban. I've heard, I think Jerry Stackhouse compared him to Dean Smith and all that, and talking about the things that those guys have done. I will say this. I believe Tim Corbin and his approach at Vanderbilt has had a major impact on college baseball, because I remember starting to do these games a number of years ago and being in the SEC, and the SEC was very much built toward trying to be major league oriented. And so they kind of did everything the way the majors would do it, which meant you motivate yourself. You show up when you can, workouts are when you can, everything's laid back. Don't worry about it. And here comes Tim Corbin, and he walks in and says, okay, guys, we're going to line up for the national anthem. We're going to do it this way. We're going to stand the same way. We're going to do the same thing, and we're going to do it every time. And then between innings, we're going to go out, and you guys who are in the dugout, get out and stretch, do whatever you want to do. If you want to have a, funny kind of moment, whatever, but I need you guys to get out there and do that. And I remember vividly people in that early going laughing at Vanderbilt and thinking, you're acting little league. You're acting like, kids, that are playing down the street. Now look at college baseball. Pretty much everybody acts that way. And I think that's in great tribute to Tim Corbin and Vanderbilt, because I think they have turned the appearance and the approach of college baseball into something much more specific than Major League Baseball was. And I think that's a great credit to him.
Yeah, and I think that's the stuff that provides a magnetism, the way MLB, which is not to knock it, the quality of play is great, but there's a sterility about it and a dispassionateness, I guess. I don't know if that's even a word, but you know what I mean. That in college baseball, it's probably not good to make up words on a Vanderbilt podcast, but I think I just did. Right. You know what I meant by it. The point is, I think that there is an emotional component that tugs at your heartstrings through all those things that MLB just doesn't and maybe can't have. And I think that's why this game is going to continue to grow in popularity.
Well, I think the other thing that has happened, Chris, is I believe Major League Baseball now understands, given the course of the last 10 years, in my opinion, that college baseball is a good training ground. And so if you remember, 10 years ago, you'd see draft picks and 6 or 7 of the top 10 are going to be high school kids. That's not the case now. I think Major League Baseball has understood, as players, especially in the Southeastern Conference, but certainly around the country, are getting quality teaching. They're getting better. And as a result, it might not be a bad idea, instead of drafting a kid 17 years old out of high school, to wait and draft a kid who's played 3 years in the Southeastern Conference. I don't think there's any question that that's gotten better. I think that's a big part of this. I think that Major League Baseball is now convinced that these players are getting taught the way they would like them to be taught. They're learning the right techniques. And I think as a result, let's face it, are you going to be better served to play in the SEC or in Class A ball? And that's a decision that has to be made. I would tell you, I think most people think, if you're playing the SEC, you're probably better off. And so I give a lot of credit to Tim Corbin, but to a number of coaches and folks in the SEC that I think have made a big difference in that regard.
Joe, I've got several more questions, and I'll move along with those quickly out of respect to your time because we've already been on for 43 minutes. But I do want to ask you a couple things that maybe you have some insight that I don't have. The MLB draft, I have always kind of thought that was a Major League Baseball thing in terms of the timing, that they were the holdup. But I listened to and watched his body language as Rob Manfred spoke to that at the last draft. It sounds to me like MLB is a lot more willing to work with college baseball and moving the draft around playing time. Is it the NCAA that's the holdup there?
It may be. I think what's going to ultimately happen, Chris, and this is just me, I believe they will move the draft to the week of the World Series. So once the determinations are made, the announcements are made on Monday, to me, I would think the draft should start Monday night. And then get that process going, because then you're only impacting a much smaller group of people. I think that makes perfect sense. It makes no sense in the regard that you're not having anybody that can't get to you, that's at that level, that can't play again. I mean, they're going to be tied up, so that doesn't make any difference. But I think you want to get it out of the point where you're in the middle of a really significant point for a lot of players. And I think Major League Baseball, I think Rob is sensitive to that. I think college baseball has made enough of a case in that regard that they would like to change that. I would not be at all surprised to see it move to that Monday before the World Series starts.
I think doing that and putting it in Omaha would be perfect.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about it. It makes perfect sense. If you're going to build everything around that, you've got all the attention in the world on the World Series. Why not tee it up at TD Ameritrade Park and go? I think that makes great sense.
The other thing that has come out so much the last couple of weeks, and you see this on Twitter, is Vanderbilt wins because of the scholarships. And you see fans of other teams saying, well, if we had unlimited scholarships, we'd win that much too. I'm not going to ask you to get into a complicated breakdown of opportunity Vanderbilt, which, by the way, is completely within the rules. Any other school could do that if they wanted to, although you would have to raise an incredible amount of money to do so. But how much an advantage is it? I mean, obviously it's some advantage, but at the same time, your starting point with tuition is jacked up considerably. It's kind of like, okay, maybe you get a scholarship of X amount, but the bottom line number you have to pay is still probably more for most of those kids than it would be to go to most of the SEC schools. What's your sense on how much an advantage it is? My thing is it's probably a little bit more than fans would like to admit, but probably not nearly as much as fans of other teams have implied.
Well, you touch on a couple of things, and one is it's absolutely within the rules, so that's great. It's certainly something that every other school can do, should they choose to do so, and that's fine. I think it kind of drives home the point again, and I think with college baseball, where it is now, I think it continues to drive home the point that they need to revisit the number of scholarships that are available. Now, there are a lot of factors involved. Title IX's involved, and so you've got all those things that you have to deal with. But you know what? If I'm in a situation where I have found something that I believe we can do, that we can do legally, that we can do successfully, which is what Vanderbilt is doing, and a number of other schools around the country are doing as well, then there should be no qualms, there should be no issue. And then there are a couple of points that I think are going to be on the front burner here for college baseball. I think the scholarship number, Chris, is going to be one of them. I think the paid third assistant coach is going to be another. That's going to be a big deal. Tim Corbin is passionate about that. About how ridiculous it is to have voted against paying a third assistant. in that regard. So I think that's going to come up as well. So, and I think what's happening now is what you're seeing is growing pains. This college baseball has become popular. College baseball has become a moneymaker, for a lot of people. And so now when that happens, you start to look at all the other things, all the underlying things that go around it. And so I would not be at all surprised to see this conversation continue. But I can tell you that he would be very, very supportive of, opening up all scholarships for everybody in that regard.
Let's see. Door fan wants to know, View Perry wants to know anything about additions to Hawkins Field. I know they're going to redo the turf this summer. Anything else on the slate there?
Mm-hmm. Don't know, Chris. That's a good question. I was talking about that with somebody earlier today, as a matter of fact. And, I'm not sure what the next level of plans would be. You're right. The turf is going to be replaced. They're going to do that. They're due for that in that regard. And so they will get that done. I don't know what the final facilities plan is. I know Malcolm Turner is going through a really kind of a massive overlook of everything that we have and what you want to do and when you want to do it and how you want to do it. But looking at Hawkins, as you know, Chris, you've been there all the time. How do you expand? Where do you expand if you're going to? What's that going to be? I think that's, conversations that are still being held and certainly should be. But I'm not sure. And I can tell you right now, there is no definitive plan for anything that's going to change anytime soon.
I think a deck over the infield would make sense. It would provide a little bit of shade and shelter from rain for the people down low and some additional seating too.
Well, there's all kinds of options, Chris. I've heard people say, why don't you shut down Jess Neely Drive, eliminate Jess Neely Drive, build a second deck. Cars don't come through there anymore. Just make it kind of a big, athletics area. I mean, there are tons of options in that regard, but that impacts a lot of people and a lot of different things. So I don't know what they will do, if they will do anything in the near future, but it's kind of nice to be thinking about, quite frankly, the opportunity that people want to expand and have more people have the opportunity to come and see the Vandy boys play.
Dusty Orleans wants to know your favorite broadcast counterpart in the league and within the rest of the Power Five.
Oh my gosh! Don't make me nickname names there. I've got so many good friends in broadcasting, so I would not want to say one is my favorite. Chris Stewart at Alabama is a very, very close friend of mine, and I'm blessed that he survived a stroke that would have probably taken most people's lives, and so I'm thrilled that he is still with us. Wes Durham is one of my best friends in the world, and I think the world of him and all that he has done, a former voice of the Commodores, and all the great things he has done. And boy, you just go down the list. There's so many that I really enjoy being with. Mick Hubert at Florida and Jeff Dantzler at Georgia, and so many people that I've been blessed to be around for a long, long time. And John Morris at Baylor, who's a guy that we don't get to communicate very often, but it was great to see him in the bowl game. And so I guess the blessing is when you do this long enough, you get to know a lot of people that do what you do, and you have a special opportunity to kind of be in that group. And so it's there's not one. I would hate to pick one. There's Stan Cotton at Wake Forest has been there from the beginning. He's a Tennessee guy who's done some wonderful things at Wake Forest, and so the list kind of goes on and on. But I'm really blessed to kind of have this group of people to be around.
Two quick ones from Door Fan. Your most favorite Vanderbilt sporting event you've ever attended and your favorite broadcaster of all time.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. Favorite Vanderbilt event I've ever attended. I'm going to give you two. One would be the 2014 national championship, just because that was the first one, and the what all that meant, and to be a part of that. I would tell you Shane Foster's senior night against Mississippi State was a pretty special night. It was interesting because that game was not televised. And so the only option for you was to hear it on the radio, which was great for me. And to hear this guy and to see this guy knock down 9 consecutive 3-pointers and beat Mississippi State in overtime was very special. Let me throw one other in as well, and this is totally kind of off the wall, but Worth Scott's home run to beat Tennessee and put Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament for the first time in a number of years really was kind of the jump start to the Vanderbilt baseball program. I think that was the one that sort of got them catapulted to the next level. And, 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, and, facing a number 1 draft pick in Luke Hochaver and hit that home run over the wall in right field to win the game was a pretty special moment. In terms of broadcasters, boy, you know what? I admired a number of guys growing up. And I will tell you, I was a huge Dick Enberg fan. I thought Dick Enberg was a guy that epitomized to me the opportunity, a guy that was in the big moment, but seemed to be a really, really nice guy, a guy that you could walk up to and talk to, and just chat with. He just seemed to be extremely, really good at what he did, but just seemed to be a really solid guy, and I really liked him in that regard. So he would be way up on my list. In terms of radio guys, well, of course, I grew up in Nashville, and so I listened to Paul Eels when he was at Vanderbilt, and that was huge for me. And I got the blessing to work with him, for a couple of years at Channel 4 before he went to Arkansas. And so he's a guy that would be way up on my list as well. So those guys mean a lot to me.
Okay, 2 more, then I'll get you out of here. View Puri wants your quick take on the football season and the good things that you're hearing.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of good things. I mean, the challenge is this schedule is brutal. I mean, you start with Georgia, then go to Purdue. We're going to learn about this team early. LSU coming in early as well. This is going to be a challenging schedule for this team to deal with. There's going to be competition at quarterback. I believe they're going to roll into the fall not knowing exactly who the number 1 guy is going to be, and so that's going to be settled during fall camp. The good news is you got a lot of weapons around you with a Kalijah Lipscomb, with a Jared Pinkney, with a Keyshawn Vaughn. So you've got some opportunities. You've got some other younger guys or some guys that maybe can step up to another level, in that regard, receiver-wise. So there's going to be some options out there. Got to plug in a couple of holes on the offensive line. I think the defense will clearly be better. But once again, this schedule is really, really difficult. And so we'll learn a lot when you start with Georgia, then go to Purdue in your first 2 games. That's going to tell you a lot. But I'm really looking forward to it. This is a team that has a chance to be clearly better, but against a schedule that is clearly tougher.
Last one, Vandy Stud wants to know the differences you've noticed since Malcolm Turner came aboard.
Well, Malcolm is an outstanding individual. I've spent some time with him, and he's a guy that came in and sought out people and wanted to talk and find out what people knew and what people thought. And he came in, and I think one of the things he told me in one of our first meetings, he said, I didn't come here to do the status quo. And that was a good message for me, that he was coming in thinking, we're gonna push the envelope. We're gonna do things outside the box. Obviously, when you saw the announcement, not so long ago, that this whole facilities process and this whole evaluation was in place, that was a big deal. The announcement that they were going to make the major changes in the Memorial Gym already in terms of lighting, in terms of sound, which are way overdue, was great, in that regard. So he's a guy that maybe doesn't toot his own horn necessarily, but he gets a lot of stuff done behind the scenes. And I'm really impressed with him and his vision for what he wants to do. He wants to take this to another level. I think he was very pleased to take over this program at a time when he took it over, when David Williams had done some marvelous things, but he wanted to take it a step further. And so that was his mindset walking in here. And so we'll see how this all plays out and where it goes. But I'm really impressed with his mindset and what he wants to do. And I think if you're a Vanderbilt fan, you should be very excited for what I think is coming, because I think he understands there are some decisions that have to be made, clearly with the football stadium, clearly with the Memorial Gym. And as you said, Chris, earlier, I mean, what are they going to do with Hawkins Field? Do you look to expand it? What do you do? I think all those things are going to be in play, and he's right in the middle of that.
Joe, I didn't mean to keep you as long as I did, but we had a lot to talk about and a lot of great questions. I appreciate your time in answering those. I want to give you the floor to end the show. I want you to give out your Twitter handle, where we can find you on the broadcast, and maybe anything at Vanderbilt you want to promote. The floor is yours to do so.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris. It's always, I first just want to thank everybody. I mean, we've had so many wonderful fans that have sent so many wonderful notes to me, and through Twitter and through Facebook, that have enjoyed what we do, and I greatly appreciate it. And I tell everybody, and I totally mean it, how blessed I am to have this opportunity to do something that I love with a school and with the people that I love so much. And so that's terrific. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Fisher VU. But I can tell you, Chris, to be honest, I'm going to be hard to find for the next month or so. I'm going to take a little time. I mean, because when you start in August and you finish in June, there's not a lot of time to get a little downtime. And so we're gonna take the family. We're going to recharge the batteries a little bit, and to get ready to come back for fall football and get ready to go. But it's great to be with you. And again, it's if you're going to do this and work 10 months, 11 months through the course of the year, it's nice to finish it with a national championship, which we were fortunate to do.
Yeah, I think you've earned the time off by now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, he's Joe Fisher, the voice of Vanderbilt Athletics. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thanks for listening. We've got more coming later in the week.